Hey y'all, welcome to Sandy's Library. I'm Sandy.
And I'm Sara. Today's video is about the suspicious death of Sallie J. Bell Fuller.
And just real quick, don't forget about our dogs. They can be noisy sometimes, but let's go ahead and get started. And just as an FYI, Sallie was my great-grandmother Lizzie's sister. And we're not going to torture y'all with our half-cousin's version of the tale from his manuscript either. We're basically going to tell you what we know of this story, which came from my grandmother and her siblings. But first, Sara's going to tell y'all a little bit about Sallie.
Sallie was born May 14th, 1880 in Yazoo County, Mississippi. She is the daughter of Francis Marion Fuller and Nancy Isabella Hawkins, otherwise known as Marion and Bell. Sallie died January 31st, 1903 in Nash, Jackson Parish, Louisiana.
And let's not forget that when Sallie died, she was just 22 years old. She never made it to her 23rd birthday a few months later. And just as an FYI, the town of Nash is now extinct. In fact, it was long gone by the 1960s when I was a kid. Anyway, back to Sara.
Sallie married a guy from Alabama named John Thomas Johnson, September 8th, 1895 in Ashley County, Arkansas. Everybody called him Tom. They had 3 boys, Marvin, Fred, and Mark. And in January of 1903, they were expecting their 4th child.
And y'all, I just want to point out that Sallie married Tom in 1895 when she was just 15 years old. And Tom, well, he was somewhere between 27 and 30. He was one of those people with a floating birthday. Our family records show his date of birth to be November 21st, 1865 in Alabama or Arkansas. However, Ashley County marriage records show that he gave a date of birth of February 1867 in Arkansas. I know the times were different back then, but a 30-year-old man marrying a 15-year-old girl is disgusting in any era. And I'm surprised that her parents allowed it, to be honest. But anyway, back to Sara.
On the evening of January 31st, 1903, Tom Johnson showed up at his in-laws, Marion and Bell Fuller, informing them that their daughter had miscarried the baby and had subsequently died. Naturally, the Fullers returned to the Johnsons' home with their son-in-law. Later that night, Marion was sitting in the yard pondering his grief over losing his daughter.
Now, y'all, my grandmother always said that Marion himself relayed this part of the story to her many years later. Anyway, back to Sara.
Marion reported that he'd seen Tom Johnson leaving the house while carrying a small bundle. Marion followed Tom down to a pile of brush that he'd gathered while clearing the property. Marion said that he witnessed his son-in-law stuff the bundle underneath the brush pile. Later, after Tom had gone back to the house, Marion returned to the brush pile, where he retrieved Tom's hidden bundle and examined it. Marion declared that he was shocked and disgusted, as he had never seen such a bloody mess in all his life.
And you know, nobody ever said what Marion did after finding the baby thrown out like yesterday's trash. I wish I had been older when I heard these tales. Maybe then I would have had enough forethought to ask better questions. Most of these stories I heard prior to 1970-ish before Aunt Julie Bell went into the old folks' home. But anyway, back to Sara.
Family tales say that while the women prepared Sally's body for burial, they found a small puncture wound beneath one of her breasts.
And you know, between Marion's discovery of the discarded baby and the puncture wound on Sally's body, well, those two things led the family to believe that Tom had killed Sallie while trying to abort the baby.
This is true. Belle told everyone she knew that Tom Johnson had attempted to operate on Sallie to abort the baby and had ended up killing her too. Even so, the general consensus among law enforcement in this little podunk area was that there was no real proof of any wrongdoing on Johnson's part. He was never arrested.
I don't know about y'all, but the puncture wound on Sally's body, coupled with the way Johnson disposed of the deceased baby, well, it seems awfully suspicious to me. But what do I know? It's also worth noting that my great-grandmother Lizzie, Sally's older sister, gave birth to a baby girl in October of 1903. She named her Sallie. As for Tom Johnson, what happened to him, you may ask? Well, Tom deserted his and Sally's 3 boys and fled to Alabama, where he remarried and started another family. And one would think this story is over, but no.
Not quite. Years later, after Sally's children were grown, it's said that Belle was approached by an old gypsy fortune teller who was passing through the area. She offered to tell Belle's fortune if she'd pay her. Of course, Belle said she didn't have money to give her. The old gypsy responded with, "If you'll cross my palm with silver, I'll tell you the truth about your daughter Sally's death."
Man, that's pretty specific. She got her name right and everything. That'd make me sit up and take notice.
As the story goes, Belle gave the old woman $1. The fortune teller reported that Belle's son-in-law had killed her daughter with a poisoned hat pin. She said that Sallie would have died anyway, as she'd been badly injured while he was trying to get rid of the baby. So Belle asked the fortune teller, "Why did he kill my daughter? She was young and pretty." The old woman said he never loved Sallie. It was her younger sister that he truly wanted, but she was too young, so he married Sallie instead.
So, poor Sallie was just a consolation prize. And if what the gypsy said is true, Tom Johnson was a worse pervert than I thought. I mean, he married Sallie when she was 15, which I find totally disgusting, but her younger sister Curtis was only 13 when Tom and Sallie got married. And in 1902, when Curtis turned 20, maybe Tom devised himself a plan to get rid of Sallie before somebody else came along and married Curtis out from under him.
However it happened, the old woman doubled down on her claim, saying, "If you don't believe me, dig around the old cedar tree in the yard. There you'll find the object he used to kill her, stuck in the root of the tree, either a hat pin or a darning needle."
Yep, there was an old cedar tree from days gone by, still standing in the yard. But the Fullers never went to look for the evidence. They were afraid they'd find it. And I know a lot of folks will say the old gypsy was a con artist. Maybe she was. I don't know. I wasn't there. But I went to a fortune teller once, long time ago, when I lived in Florida. I was about 22, 23 years old. My friend and I went to see this fortune teller. and we gave fake names when we made the appointment. I think her name was Jean, but she had these tarot cards that had different palm markings on each card. And you know, I have never been able to find another deck of these palmistry tarot cards either. But anyway, my reading turned up the Wheel of Fortune card. Miss Jean studied the card's layout for a while, then asked to see my left hand. She looked at my palm, then said, "I thought so." She picked up one of the cards and said, "Look at this." I took the card, looked at it, and asked, "What's the Wheel of Fortune?" This was my first introduction to tarot cards, and I've been fascinated by them ever since. But anyway, Miss Jean says, "Compare the card to your left palm." And y'all, I was stunned to see the marks on my left palm were the same exact marks on the Wheel of Fortune card. Miss Jean asked me, "Do you write?" And I said, "I've been known to dabble." She told me that one day I would hit the New York Times bestseller list. And y'all know what? She was right. It took a while, but it did happen. And yeah, I know there are con artists out there, but guess what? Some psychics are authentic. Why do y'all think the U.S. government spent 30-something years and a shit ton of money covertly on MK Ultra? Naturally, when it got out, they said they had closed down the program. And if y'all believe that, I have a bridge for sale. But anyway, let's let Sara wrap up Belle's fortune-telling story.
Family tales say since Belle had always believed that Tom had killed Sallie, the old fortune-teller's claim convinced her of it.
My grandmother believed it too. And I want y'all to know, in our half-cousin's manuscript, he suggests that the Fullers made this shit up. But for me, it speaks volumes that Tom Johnson abandoned his children and fled to Alabama, where he remarried and started a new family. Sounds like the actions of an innocent man, don't it?
So Marion and Belle raised Sallie and Tom's 3 boys. It said that during World War I, some local boys talked Mark into enlisting. He was shipped off overseas, where he was killed during combat. It's also said that his death was the only casualty from the Guyton community during World War I.
I don't know if that last bit about him being the only casualty from World War I in the community is true or not. But what I can tell you for sure is that our ancestors, especially the Fullers, had some crappy-ass luck back then. And there's another Fuller story that concerns one of Marion's brother's descendants. Edgar Maurice Fuller, who was called Reese by his friends and family, was born June 29, 1910, in Louisiana. And he died December 25th, 1933, also in Louisiana. And Sarah's going to tell us what happened to Reese to cause him to lose his life at such a young age.
On the evening of Friday, December 22nd, 1933, Reese Fuller and his cousin, Hugh Poe, headed into West Monroe for some Christmas cheer. However, it appears that Reese and Hugh ran across W.E. Brooks, age 39, and his son, J.C. Brooks, age 19, both of Eris, Louisiana. Early Saturday morning, the 4 men got into a fight over an altercation that happened back in August. It's reported that back in August, Reese Fuller and possibly Hugh Poe too had been stealing watermelons from the Senior Brooks melon patch, and Mr. Brooks was still mad about it.
Man, these guys held some grudges, didn't they?
Yep, they did. and during this fight, the younger Brooks stabbed Reese Fuller. He died 2 days later on Monday evening, Christmas Day.
So, Reese's father, Fletcher Fuller, accuses J.C. Brooks of murder and swears out a warrant against him. So J.C. Brooks was arrested, but he would have to be indicted before going to trial. So he sat in jail for a couple of weeks while a thorough investigation was conducted.
After the investigation concluded, Brooks was released as eyewitnesses stated that Reese Fuller was the aggressor, and J.C. Brooks was only defending himself and his father.
So kids, what's the lesson we've learned here today? Never ever get caught in another person's melon patch. Okay, so this wraps up today's video.
Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back soon where we'll continue the Blood Tie series with videos about my great-grandmother Sissy Williams Phillips and her siblings.
Later, Gators.